Versatility is a quality often associated with good acting, but do you know what's thoroughly underrated? Playing one call consistently and being pretty damn good at it. Now, horror is a genre known for its archetypes, so it is hardly surprising that so many of those who act in it either pick a lane and stay there or get cast as similar characters repeatedly. And I want to stress before we start, this absolutely is not a criticism. Most of the actors I'm about to talk about here truly elevated the genre as a whole, and are people we love seeing pop up every single time. Likewise, there are, of course, exceptions to their otherwise consistent performances, which we will talk about too, but the fact is they usually play a very specific kind of character every single time they show up in this genre, and we love them for it. So with that in mind, I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are 8 famous actors who play the same role in every horror movie. Number 8, David Hess. David Hess made a name for himself starring as the vicious main villain of Wes Craven's The Last House on the Left. Here, he was a brutal tormentor acting as the leader of a gang who capture and torture a young woman. And for the early part of his career, that's the kind of role that would become Hess's bread and butter, with the actor playing some spin on this character that, to this day, he's still the most well known for. Put simply, if you needed someone to play a bad dude without any kind of moral compass, especially one with a penchant for kidnapping people or taking them hostage, then Hess was your guy. This kind of portrayal showed up in the aforementioned Last House, as well as The House on the Edge of the Park, which no, isn't actually a sequel, and even Swamp Thing, where, despite there being a literal swamp thing about causing havoc, he still found the time to kidnap the heroine of the picture. Hess was typecast outside of horror too, showing up in a bunch of other Italian genre flicks again as sex offenders and kidnappers, before pivoting to work behind the scenes on movie productions instead, though he did still do some acting here and there. Number 7, Lin Shaye. As mentioned in the introduction, just because an actor is known for one thing or might have been typecast, that doesn't make them any less beloved, hardworking, or likable, and Lin Shaye is the shining example of that. See, Shaye has been acting for decades, but since around 2010 or so became a household horror name for playing one role to perfection, that being the kindly old wise woman who'd help our heroes understand the world of the supernatural currently tormenting them. This kicked off in Insidious, but was soon implemented into the Ouija franchise as well, and she worked in this role because, simply put, she's always someone you don't want to see anything bad happen to, whether that's in 2003's Dead End or as recently as The Grudge. Now, what's interesting about Lin Shaye, though, is that her instant likability was noticed by filmmakers, who then proceeded to tweak her character archetype and actually cast her as more villainous characters to subvert audience expectations. In fact, these days, Shaye is more likely to play an older lady who seems unassuming at first, but is actually a complete psycho underneath the facade. No matter which era we're talking about though, Lin Shaye absolutely rules. Number 6, Richard Brake. You might not know his name, but you'll absolutely know his face. Richard Brake is, for whatever reason, an actor that's seemingly always picked when directors need someone to play an absolute freak. Usually cast as a pervy, dangerous guy who you absolutely would not want to be in the same room with, Brake has showed up in many a horror film over the years. This most notably began, though, in the Dwayne Johnson starring Doom movie, where Brake puts in a grim performance as a gross sleazeball soldier. And he can be seen putting in a similar performance in Hannibal Rising, The Black Dahlia, Halloween 2, 31, Mandy, and last year's Barbarian. Essentially, Brake has spent the last few decades playing abusive creeps in movies, usually with the threat of sexual violence involved somehow. And hey, you can't knock the guy for being great at it, I guess. Number 5, Kyle Gallner. Kyle Gallner is not just one of the most underrated horror actors, but for my money, he's one of the most underrated actors, period. He's one of those dudes that you just love to see every single time he shows up on screen in anything. In the early portion of his career, though, Gallner made a name for himself essentially playing one role in every movie he showed up in, that being the likable high school outsider. He was often cast as a likable teen, someone without the jock looks and respect, but someone who would round out a high school cast and sometimes get brutally killed in the process. Fundamentally, he's a nice guy who always stands up to the challenge, someone more unassuming and shy, yes, but one you usually root for, and he played this to perfection in Jennifer's Body, Red State, and A Nightmare on Elm Street. Unfortunately, you can't play a high schooler forever, but some of those traits still remained as Gallner took on more mature roles. He was still cast as someone with a more alternative appearance, who was usually a quiet, dependable guy who would try to do the right thing in the end, whether that was recently in Smile or The Cleansing Hour. Interestingly though, he did break this mold by playing an absolute bastard in 2022's Scream, but he's hoping that no matter which roles he's playing, he doesn't leave horror behind anytime soon. Number 4, Dee Wallace. The term Scream Queen has been used to describe many stars over the decades, but one of the most consistently overlooked is the fabulous Dee Wallace. Though you might know her primarily as the ma'am from E.T., Wallace had already secured a bit part in The Stepford Wives before taking on a much larger role in The Hills of Ice. There, she played Lin, the eldest daughter of the tragic Wood family that runs afoul of Papa Jupiter and his deranged clan. Dee has then continued to play the woman in peril across the rest of her horror career. Roles in The Howling, Cujo, and Critters all followed, and all see Wallace go up against some kind of evil being with the odds firmly stacked against her. Wallace's likability and screen presence made her the perfect candidate for the sympathetic Scream Queen archetype, and whilst there is plenty of discussion to be had around that trope's place in horror today, there's no denying that Dee scored an A+ for her work throughout the years. Number 3. Justin Long. Now hold up, wait a second. I know right now you're probably thinking, hang on Josh, stop being daft. Justin Long absolutely does not play the same character in every horror movie. I mean, just look at him playing the lovable hero of Jeepers Creepers compared to playing, well, a total creeper in the recent Barbarian. And yeah, I fully understand that is definitely true, but it's worth talking about today because all of these characters do have one weird thing in common, as was pointed out in an article on Fortress of Solitude covering Long's stint as a horror icon. Specifically, the piece is an in-depth look at how the actor has the worst look in the history of horror movies, period. That's because the thing about all of his characters is that yes, while they may be different in their characterization, they almost always have something truly terrible happen to them by the end. As mentioned, Long first rose to fame in Jeepers Creepers, playing the part of Darry Jenner. Along with Sister Trish, Darry attempts to evade the grasp of the evil creeper, though, well, it doesn't really work out for him. Darry's eyes ultimately get removed at the end of this movie, and this is only the first of many, many bad things to happen to Long's characters across the horror genre. He gets eaten by vampires in House of Darkness, he gets his eyes pulled out again in Barbarian, and don't even get us started on what happens to him in Tusk. Basically, if you ever find yourself in a horror film and Justin Long is somewhere nearby, you need to get the hell out of there now, because something very bad is about to go down. Number 2, Patrick Wilson. Sometimes in horror, you just need a good straight man, someone for whom everything is just a little bit too much. This type of character, of course, helps anchor the plot in reality and gives an audience someone to empathize with, just a normal guy. He's not really funny, he doesn't have many powers, he's just a dude. And the great Patrick Wilson has proven that he's the guy for this role. And while not someone who pops up in every horror movie over the sun, has demonstrated his abilities perfectly in both Insidious and the Conjuring universes. In the former, Wilson plays Josh Lambert, a father who must work with a psychic to save his son from a demonic alternate dimension. And he first appears as Ed Warren, one half of a husband and wife paranormal investigating team in The Conjuring from 2013, and here he has since reprised his role across 3 more movies. Now, both Warren and Lambert have men more or less hopelessly out of their depths when dealing with the supernatural, but remain firm as calm, strong family men. And while yes, Warren does have more experience, he is still usually outmatched against the various demons that he comes up against. Wilson's characters are also heavily tied to the idea of family, like I mentioned, and how he must protect those he loves from the forces of evil. Thankfully for us though, his brothers Luke and Owen are yet to be put in any supernatural danger. And yeah, that's a joke by the way, don't check Wikipedia, I'm just having a bit of a gag. Just a little bit of a gag. Number 1, Bruce Campbell. Sometimes an actor will become so intrinsically linked with a specific character that it becomes impossible for them to be anyone else in a film. And this is most definitely the case for horror heartthrob Bruce Campbell and his most famous persona, Ash Williams. The main character of Sam Raimi's Evil Dead series, Ash is a shotgun-toting smart aleck who goes up against the marauding Deadites when they're summoned by the Necronomicon. However, the Bruce Campbell persona as we know and love it today really only established itself in the second movie in this franchise. And since then, Campbell has essentially been playing an exaggerated version of Bruce Campbell ever since. Campbell has specifically played Ash in 4 movies, 1 TV show, and a whole bunch of video games, so when you spend that much time with a character, parts of it are just of course going to come out without you even noticing. And ever since Evil Dead, Campbell has made a living playing Ash-adjacent characters. Whether this was in Maniac Cop, Sundown the Vampire in Retreat, and even Bubba Hotep to name but a few. And yes, don't jump to the comments yet, I haven't forgotten the fact that he plays literally Elvis in Bubba Hotep, but that's what makes it even more impressive. In Bubba Hotep, he manages to still play Bruce Campbell while simultaneously playing Elvis Presley. God damn, that movie rules. So yeah, essentially, no matter what the character is, Brucey gives the people what they want, and what they want is that chin. So, that's our list. I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. Again, this is a very loving list. We're not criticizing these actors or anything like that. We just want to send them up because they need to be recognized as beloved actors, in my opinion. Are there any other actors that you love every single time they show up in horror movies? And what do you think of this lot here? Let me know, and while you're down there, if you could, please give us a like, share, subscribe, and head over to whatculture.com for more lists and news like this every single day. Even if you don't though, I've been Josh. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.